What's going on, everybody? It's FREEDO here. This forum poster asked a respectable and inquisitive question about Tracer. She hasn't been touched for 2 years, no nerfs, no buffs, she's never changed at all, but why is she, according to some people, overpowered now? Now, if you don't know, I believe this is a sentiment that's more so on the higher end of play. We've heard pro players like Taimu famously say that Tracer is overpowered. I mean, if Taimu can't hit a Tracer head with McCree, who's supposed to, you know? There's some clips online of Tracer's crouch spam being a little bit too much, probably. And when you watch pro events where Taimu actually does take McCree, I swear he goes into this evil Terminator mode because anytime they put the camera on him, it's like he's playing with a vengeance. Anyway, that's a side note. Tracer is a bit more mechanically easy to play than a couple of the other DPS heroes. She's still at the top of the skill tier, but just slightly below a couple other heroes that are a little bit more either advanced in the aim department or in the complexity department. And to the point of why she is just turning to be overpowered now to some people, I have a few arguments to that point, but who cares what I think? Jeff Kaplan responded with a very intricate post that I think warrants careful attention. The perception of balance is often more powerful than balance itself. Ooh, that's such a weighty sentence, guys. Don't overlook how deep this sentence is. I could make an entire video just talking about this concept alone. The community perception of something, and that's any community, the pro community, the casual community, whatever you assume is the case, builds a foundation in the thought process of those players. And it almost doesn't matter what the reality is if the perception is a certain way. A great example is Sombra has been buffed and buffed and buffed to the point where pros are picking her on 2CP like every single map, but a lot of matchmaking players, they kind of haven't gotten the memo, right? And I know many of you have told me this when I've made these Sombra guides. Well, how do I get my teammates to know that Sombra isn't a throw pick? Well, she's been buffed over and over again, but if the community thinks that Sombra is still bad or doesn't know how to play her, namely to exploit her health packs in order to farm EMP, which is the strongest aspect of her kit. That's the thing that defines her as being really incredibly good. Well, they just don't access that part of the meta, and the balance couldn't help Sombra anymore. That's the thing. Unless Sombra had a one-shot kill gun, and as she walked out of spawn, she killed your entire enemy team. Oh, now Sombra's good. Like, there's no other way to really explain it. Players have to, like, slowly learn, you know? So there's only so much that Jeff and the Blizzard team can do to balance the game to help fix it for everybody else. Now let's go on to his next point. All heroes are affected by changes to other heroes, even if nothing changed. Both would adapt new strategies and tactics that would cause the balance of the game to shift. Of course, this is the butterfly effect that we speak about on this channel quite frequently. I'll get into this more in a second. He goes on to explain how Reinhardt was considered a must pick, and now he's nearly unpickable, strangely enough. He explains that nothing was changed on Reinhardt either, except for Earthshatter getting nerfed. However, side note, I do think that hurt Reinhardt more than the team had anticipated, because Earthshatter being somewhat broken, I guess, in that it affected you probably too high off the ground, but because it did that, you could pretty reliably hammer down a Genji blade, and now Genji can basically jump over your Earthshatter, so it's not really a thing anymore. Playing Pharah myself, I always thought it was goofy that I was able to get Earth Shattered like 3 feet off the ground, but I don't think anybody is shedding tears for mobility characters right now when Reinhardt's struggling. They could just revert this, and I don't think I would care. I don't know what you guys think. Let me know in the comment section down below. But speaking of that butterfly effect, I think one thing that was incredibly strong to really making Reinhardt feel unplayable is the power that Lucio got. Around the time when Lucio got changed is when this mobility meta really started to ramp up. And I think when Lucio has the power to just boop Rein wherever he wants every few seconds, it kind of just throws that death ball style out the window in a lot of ways. He goes on to compare to Zenyatta, who's getting increased usage as well, though he hasn't been changed in a long time, especially against Winston and D.Va. There's a lot of defense matrix and bubbles around, blocking Ana line of sight, so Ana's very hard to play at high levels of play because so many teams are playing Winston D.Va, and there's just not really angles for you to play Ana unless you do some massive outplay, whereas you can cast Discord while defense matrix is up, which is a big difference between doing something and Ana not being able to do anything if defense matrix is in her way. And because of this, Tracer's balance, beyond the obvious tuning knobs that we have, is greatly affected by the balance of the other heroes in the game, as well as the perception of how good she is at any one time. And the funny thing about the perception of Tracer, many pro events ago, this fairly decent pro player named Soon decided that him and his team were going to casually walk into a competitive LAN where every team was running triple tank. It was written in stone that triple tank was the meta. You had to play triple tank, and Soon's Tracer danced around every Roadhog in the tournament, built up Pulse Bomb, and they pulse bombed and cross-fired their way to victory, thus proving the potential that Tracer could have. The only reason that other players didn't really get that Tracer value out of Tracer is because the skill cap required to do so was so high. You had to dodge hook every time. And if you're Soon, that's not a problem. Which is interesting about the perception of things, because way back then, we made a video saying Tracer is great against tanks in the tank meta. And some people looked at us, oftentimes, as many things that we say, "What? Are you crazy? You're Overwatch? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." And now, guess what? Rein is unplayable because Tracer bombs him every opportunity. Oh, hi, you're playing Reinhardt? Well, pulse bomb in your pocket, now you're dead. Tracer has always been good against tanks, but back then, healing was so good that playing tanks was easy. And then it would have taken far too much skill to reliably play Tracer in those conditions, but if you could outskill your opposition, it definitely was a play that you had available to you. More nerdy meta-breaking talk. Jeff goes on to say, "It's always fun to study how people innovate to, quote, break a meta. In the NHL in the 90s, teams developed an overly defensive strategy, think 3-tank meta, called the trap, which was later evolved into the left-wing lock. Teams like New Jersey and Detroit won championships using these methods. Eventually, the NHL had to make a rule change to change the meta. There also was an example of a contestant on Jeopardy playing the game differently that caused the meta to break," and links to a Kotaku article. Fun stuff. I read through the Kotaku article, and the interesting thing that this player is doing that's actually enraging much of the Jeopardy fan base. Jeopardy questions are on a grid. Each column has a theme. The questions on the bottom are worth the most, and they're the most difficult. Traditional Jeopardy meta is to take the hardest questions first and try to snag them away from your opponents, win those questions, because of course, the lower questions aren't worth as much. So when it's your turn to pick, you want to try to attack those right away. But of course, there also is a bit of a RNG comeback mechanic called the Daily Double that's hidden and scattered throughout the board. Most players will attack the highest one and then go down sequentially after that. But what this player does is just like choose randomly trying to find the daily doubles. So whenever it's his time to pick, he's trying to pinpoint a good spot for the randomization of where the daily double would be placed. And that, of course, can feel kind of jarring and disorganized when you're just picking randomly across the board, because the audience then is getting questions from every different type of thing, and it can be hard to follow. But that's what works for him, I guess. This is what makes games so interesting, is that under our nose, because of the perception of how you're supposed to play, and a good example, of course, is Jeopardy, where most players would just go for the highest number and then go down, there might be this hidden meta strategy underneath that nobody's really thinking of, but definitely exists. This is why I describe the meta as sort of being an untouchable concept that we are trying to assemble. The meta exists out of reality, and us mere mortals are just sort of toying with the tools that we have at our disposal. None of us are perfect players, no team is perfect either, so based on human biases and human fallibility, the command of the strategies that could exist within the game, if like a perfect AI 6-man death squad would figure out the best strategies and just defeat every human player. Until that happens, we're sort of left experimenting and sometimes assuming, sometimes incorrectly. Don't get FREEDO talking about meta. This is what you're gonna get. At the end of it, have we been able to conclude, is Tracer overpowered? Well, she's very powerful in this meta. I don't think any team has really practiced or give serious consideration to the new Roadhog fighting Tracer. But like the interview I did with Emong said, is Roadhog too weak against everything else to really warrant it? But I think a team comp that I thought should be run a long time ago could sort of incorporate all of these characters that we're saying aren't very good right now in a way that might surprise you. Reinhardt, Roadhog, McCree Reaper, and some mix of supports. Lucio's got to be in there, of course, if we're actually making a real team comp. I think teams have been afraid to even try the McCree Reaper combo because both have just been deemed bad for a long time. It's just bad. No point in playing them. Nope, can't do that. Other strategies like May Reaper used to be really popular. I don't know why pro teams aren't even experimenting with any of these strategies, but I haven't seen them used in quite some time, especially when May can freeze through defense matrix and then Reaper can come in for the punish and just demech her immediately. Now, the question is Is that too gimmicky and slow? Maybe. Is that just some big way to circumnavigate defense matrix when it's probably better to just defense matrix yourself and play meta? Well, sometimes, but we don't know because the best teams haven't really tried them out now. But I think we've already seen the strength of solo support in many different contexts. I think Mei can either flex in as a support pick based purely on her crowd control strengths alone, or as an off-tank pick. And with more intelligent engagement strategies, we probably could move quite far from this assumed dive comp meta that is the only way to play if and when those things get developed and get used. But until they're unlocked, everyone thinks, well, Tracer's OP, Defense Matrix is OP, let's all just pick Tracer and Defense Matrix and blink and damage eat our way to victory until one team wins, right? Oftentimes it takes time for, honestly, the Koreans to prove what the strongest strategies are. Nobody was playing D.Va in the defensive Defense Matrix way in the pro scene until the Koreans really pioneered Defense Matrix management in a way that is more efficient than even Reinhardt's shield. You think like Reinhardt shield, 2,000 health points of shielding, put it in front, it can block all sorts of damage, it's really good. Well, Defense Matrix, you pop in and out at whim and can block ults even better than Reinhardt's shield, and she can dive, just sort of proved to be the best thing since sliced bread, and sort of, again, with this butterfly effect problem, unintended consequences with the changes that went through to Defense Matrix that allowed it to function through objects, allowing you to use it in new ways, making it much stronger. So around and around, the circle of meta goes. Where we'll stop, nobody knows. It's always a big conversation. I know a lot of you oftentimes do get, I think, bogged down in these nerdy conversations, and you have to forgive me and the channel, of course, for having the opposite opinion. I love discussing the implications of how patches can change the strategies and have these ripple effects, because at heart, a lot of gaming nerds are just living in our superpower fantasy land where we want to know who's going to win the fight between Wolverine and Cyclops. Like, who's the better basketball player, Michael Jordan or LeBron? We always have these conversations. The biggest nerds in every field are going to really get into depth into appreciating these things, to great annoyance to those around us who are just like, can we just sit back and watch the NBA Finals, guys? Like, why do we have to debate this constantly? I understand it can be tiresome, but of course, Jordan's better. We all know that. There's no reason to debate. Anyway, if you did enjoy the video and you found it useful, informative, entertaining, all of the above, please hit the like button because it really does help us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the content. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe because we upload each and every day. So you're going to want to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Link to the description, you can check out our Twitter and our Discord server where you can interact with our community and find teammates to pair up with. That's been it for me. I've been FREEDO for Your Overwatch. See you guys next time.